Nice to see you. All righty. So Ryan Tovim, everyone, good afternoon. Good to see everyone. That's pretty certain. Nice to see everyone, and we're also we're live streaming this again. So everyone has, if anyone's watching via live stream, they have a very good view of my head and this table at the moment.
Hello out there.
Right now it's only us, but it's so I want to welcome everyone who's watching via live stream. I want to welcome everybody who's here. I'm going to close the door. Hello. All right. So, just by a show of hands, how many people were with us on Sunday? How many people were with us on Sunday? Okay, a good portion. All right. So then I told you there was going to be a test. Here it is. All right. What is tzedakah? Okay, I heard charity. I heard justice. Anyone else? Righteousness. Now, what's the answer? Yes. All the above. Right? Tzedakah is one of these words. Someone said it. I forget who said it on Sunday, but tzedakah is one of these words that perhaps we can't properly translate into English. It's tzedakah. That's what it is, right? But however, as we saw from a lot of the texts that we looked at on Sunday when we're trying to define what is tzedakah, it's actually something that's more than charity. Charity is probably not enough of a definition. Many acts that we perform when we turn to tzedakah often come in the form of charity. But we talked on Sunday that really this idea of justice or righteousness is actually probably getting more to the point of what tzedakah is. Why? It's a mitzvah. It's a commandment. It's something that we're required to do. Right? It's not by giving tzedakah, by doing tzedakah, we're not necessarily going above and beyond. We're simply doing what we're supposed to do. Right? Okay. Good. So today, what I want to talk about today is dive a little deeper into, we started to get there last time, but the connection between tzedakah and the High Holy Days. And there's one connection in particular which I'd like to talk about, which I'd like everyone to sort of hold in your mind for now, which is the connection between tzedakah and the fasting that we do on Yom Kippur. Okay, so before we see some sources on this, why do we fast on Yom Kippur?
To afflict our souls.
To afflict our souls. Right? Okay. Why do our souls need to be afflicted?
Because you probably all bad stuff.
Okay. That's a whole nother class series, right? Okay. But to afflict our souls. All right, good.
Not just for repentance, but I think that we shouldn't have something that would interfere with our prayers, of taking away something from our prayers by eating. Excellent.
Okay, excellent. So what? Yeah, but so then when you feel hungry, that might get in the way too. We can make the opposite argument, but you're right. There's a lot of people in our tradition that have suggested that, right? That actually some say this is about affliction of the soul, right? We should feel that sense of suffering from that and on this day of judgment. Others say no, it actually helps us connect better with the moment and what's taking place around us with the prayers. Okay? Which, by the way, there's also a connection here with angels. Why? Angels don't eat, right? Angels don't eat, right? And many things that we do on the High Holy Days, especially on Yom Kippur, is intended to mimic the angels, right? It's the day that we are closest to being like an angel, right? We can't be angels, right? As human beings on earth. But as close as we can get to that experience of being an angel, it takes place on Yom Kippur. What are some other ways that we experience that? Amy?
For me, it takes the emphasis off the body and the human and takes you to a different level. It's all spiritual.
Good. Okay,
and you're
good.
not thinking about anything but the spiritual aspect of who you are.
Good. We remove all bodily and physical pleasures of the day are removed, right? It's not just fasting. What are other restrictions on Yom Kippur? We don't wear leather. Washing, sex.
Wearing whites.
Right, we wear whites. Why do we wear white, by the way? Purity, right? Some people like to think of that as like an angelic color. You could go there if you'd like. But really it's about purity. And also that Yom Kippur is supposed to be, is imagined to be, a rehearsal of our death, right? A rehearsal of our death. Which, by the way, when we die, we're not going to be eating anything, right? We're not going to, be worried about washing ourselves, at least after the burial has taken place, right? And we wear white because that mimics the shrouds that we're buried in. Same reason, by the way, a kittel is worn. Kittel is worn when is a kittel worn? This is like test 101 here. When do we wear a kittel? Pesach. Good. We wear kittel at the Pesach Seder. We wear kittel at a wedding, and we wear kittel on the High Holy Days. And some are buried in a kittel. Actually, some people choose to be buried in that same kittel. Right? That it actually mimics either the shrouds that we will be buried in, or perhaps the actual kittel itself that we will be buried. Okay. So we fast on Yom Kippur. Some explanations are to afflict ourselves. We are supposed to, we're rehearsing our death in that way, and we also need to try to make it to the next day, and we're doing whatever we can to show God that we're all in on this repentance thing, on Teshuvah, right? Others say it helps connect us to the moment, remove those bodily pleasures, so we can purely be focused on the spiritual, right? And sort of take that to a higher level. And others suggest, maybe even that this can be seen as in some way a combination of the two, that we're mimicking angels in that moment, okay? And angels, one of the things the angels don't do is they don't eat, right? We say some line, like Baruch Shem Kavod Malchut Olam Va'ed. We say that out loud, which is a line that's reserved to be said out loud only by angels, right? But on that day, the people are allowed to say it out loud, like the angels say it out loud supposedly every day, okay? So there's lots of different reasons that we fast on Yom Kippur, okay? Has anyone ever thought of a connection between fasting on Yom Kippur and Tzedakah?
It gives you empathy for those people who don't have enough food in the world.
Good. Okay. Meaning, all of a sudden I feel hungry and I realize that there are people that feel this every day. Okay? Good.
Also, if you strip away who we are physically and our surroundings, it's all just about the spiritual. We're no different one person or another. So it's a way of looking at everybody as equal and deserving of equal.
Very nice. We had a wonderful conversation on Sunday talking about tzedakah as this quest for justice in the world, the quest of bringing a better sense of equality to the world, and perhaps that's something that we get closer to achieving on Yom Kippur by removing the food from our lives, by removing the luxuries such as jewelry or leather or some perfumes and those types of things that we don't turn to on Yom Kippur, and it becomes an equalizer for us. That's beautiful. Any other connections? All right, there we go. I planted it right there. Is this the fast that I desire? So we're going to take a look at that now, because we don't just practice it on Yom Kippur. We don't just experience fasting on Yom Kippur, but we actually read about it as well. Take one in here. There you go. All right. I think so. Are there more going around? All right. Judy, you hit it on the head there, all right? We're going to take a look.
I remember we signed a whole big thing. I think it was in the Vietnam War. I can't quite remember. We were really activists, and I remember signing it. I still have it.
Okay.
Yes.
All right.
Anybody need
I want to recognize that it's possible that this session, and I hope I accomplished this, by the way, but this session might really shake up how you thought of Yom Kippur and the High Holy Days. That's part of my goal, by the way. We'll talk about that at the end. But I want to recognize that this is that this may not be the Yom Kippur that we're used to. Okay, but I want to take a look at this text from Isaiah. This is what we read. This is the Haftarah that we read on Yom Kippur morning. This is just an excerpt from the Haftarah. right, beginning at the beginning of chapter 58. We read part of chapter 57 as well in the Haftarah. And this is the prophet Isaiah. Okay? So I need someone who's going to read in a very prophetic, Yom Kippur, let us have it voice. Who's got it? Who's Isaiah? Bonnie. Cry with full throats.
Cry with full throat, without restraint. Raise your voice like a ram's horn.
Aha, we've already got the High Holy Day tie in there, okay?
Yep. Declare to my people their transgression, to the house of Jacob their sin. To be sure they seek me daily, eager to learn my ways.
Just to be clear, Isaiah is speaking in God's voice. Okay? Okay, keep going.
Like a nation that does what is right, that has not abandoned the laws of its God, they ask me for the right way. They are eager for the nearness of God. They are eager for the They are eager for the nearness of God. Why? When we fasted, did you not see? When we starved our bodies, did you pay no heed? Because on your fast day, you see to your business and oppress all your laborers. Because you fast in strife and contention, and you strike with a wicked fist. Your fasting today is not such as to make your voice heard on high. Is such the fast a desire, a day for men to starve their bodies? Is it bowing the head like a bulrush and lying in sackcloth and ashes? Do you call that a fast? A day when the Lord is favorable? No, this is the fast I desire, to unlock fetters of wickedness and untie the cords of the yoke, to let the oppressed go free, to break off every yoke. It is to share your bread with the hungry and to take the wretched poor into your home. When you see the naked, to clothe him and not to ignore your own kin. Then shall your light burst through like the dawn, and your healing spring up quickly. Your vindicator shall march before you. The presence of the Lord shall be your rear guard. Then, when you call, the Lord will answer. When you cry, he will say, here I am. If you banish the yoke from your midst, the menacing hand and evil speech, and you offer your compassion to the hungry and satisfy the famished creature, you shall your light shine in.
Okay, I think we get the point, right?
Yeah.
We got the point, right? What's beautiful reading, Bonnie. Thank you very much.
Oh,
What
give
is
me a day.
What is the prophet saying? Do we have enough chairs?
There's some holding up right here.
All right. What is the prophet? Some of the feedback I got was that they want people who are watching want to see our faces, and apparently the back of my head. So we're going to switch back and forth from the text to this room. What's Isaiah saying? This is the Haftarah that we read on Yom Kippur morning. What's the message that Isaiah is sharing with us?
But even though you may be fasting or crying up to God, if you are not doing this with a heart that is doing wrong, this is not true repentance.
Excellent. Okay, good. Anyone have anything to add? Amy.
Well, it really changes the way you perceive a fast, right? I think most people see a fast as something that you're obligated to do, and it's hard, and it's abstention, and it's something being taken away. Whereas this is really saying that that's not what it is. It's not a punishment. It's not asking for anything in return, but to see it as something positive, as an opportunity to throw things off, to do better, to see the opportunities that are in front of you, and that perhaps this fast just puts you in that mindset so that you can see it and ignore the distractions of everything else.
Good. That the fast helps us to put in that mindset, and it gets back to sort of the removing the physical pleasures in order to appreciate the spiritual experience, right? Good. I would take it one step further, though, than what Amy's saying. I think she's absolutely right. Right? That in some ways a fast is not, it's not, the way Isaiah imagines it is not as a punishment in the sense that we might think of it today in terms of afflicting our souls. However, he's going to take it one step further, which is to say what?
You have to take action and help others. And
Yes, yes. If the fast doesn't inspire something in us, if it doesn't move us to action, if it doesn't remind us of really what this process is all about, it's no good, right? God says, is this the fast I desire? And what's the answer? No. No. Okay, if you sit there on Yom Kippur, bang on your chest, starve yourself, right? It's not worth anything. Well, it's not worth as much, we'll say. If you don't also turn to Tzedakah, okay? If you do Teshuvah and Tefillah, which, by the way, are those other two big topics that we're talking about these 3 weeks, but fail for those to inspire you and help you return to a sense of Tzedakah, you haven't done your job, okay? Turn the page. Well, I guess you already have, perhaps, to page 2. It's like a juggling act up here. All right. What? I want to now look at a modern text. This is a beautiful piece. It's actually a beautiful essay that you can access online. It was written by Rabbi Julie Andelman. She's the JTS Director of Community Engagement. And she wrote a beautiful piece on this exact topic. Listen to what she says as analysis of the Haftarah, the reason why we specifically read this Haftarah on Yom Kippur. Someone want to read for us?
the Haftarah is a sharp predicament of the notion that ritual practice and moral behavior can exist in separate realms. We must not enter Yom Kippur under the assumption that fasting and prayer alone can bring the atonement for our sins, Isaiah contends. If we spend the day fervently engaged in ritual activities and then return to our lives as if nothing has changed, as if the spiritual self-reflection has nothing to do with how we conduct ourselves in the world, then we have missed the point entirely. Going through the motions of Yom Kippur with a sense of complacency about the problems of the world around us is, according to Isaiah, a fundamentally un-Jewish way of relating to God.
I think she spells it out pretty well. So what's she saying?
On Saturday morning, we were asked, what are we angry about? Including me, nobody said, I didn't answer. But they're all anxious about what's happening in our country and the morals that are not there.
Okay, good. And what do you see the connection here?
Fasting isn't going to help. We've got to do something.
Good, right. The fasting is actually supposed to be one of those mechanisms that helps us turn to the actualization of that understanding, right? When I feel hungry on Yom Kippur, right? Not only should I be saying, look at what I'm doing for you, God, right? Like, look how hard I'm trying here. I should also feel that sense of, well, now I have to turn to those others who are feeling some sense of a hole in their lives, right? I have to look at what are the injustices in the world, and I have to then actually turn and act on them. Not just feel something towards them, but I actually have to then take action. That's tzedakah, right? It's interesting, she's also pointing out that Yom Kippur is really a day of ritual, right? We spend a couple hours in shul on Yom Kippur.
Just a few.
A few, right? We spend a couple hours here, and we've got the prayer thing down, right? There's plenty of prayer, right? We touch on Teshuvah a lot, right? But this idea of you have to also take the ritual and infuse it with the moral, okay? Which, by the way, the Haftarah is sandwiched in between the Torah reading for Yom Kippur morning, which is what? That's Rosh Hashanah. You're right. We are going to read that too. What's the Torah reading on Yom Kippur morning? Good. Which is what? Yeah, it's the actual experience of Yom Kippur in the Torah, right? It's the Kohen Gadol entering into the Holy of Holies, and they attach a cord around his waist so he does, so they can make sure they can pull him out if anything terrible happens, right? And it's the sending of the goat, laying the sins on the head of the goat and sending it into the wilderness. It's all about ritual. Ritual, ritual, ritual. Here is how you atone for your sins. You put the sins on the goat's head. The Kohen Gadol goes into the Holy of Holies and communes with God. Ritual, ritual, ritual. We turn to the Musaf service on Yom Kippur. Again, ritual, ritual, ritual. Smack in the middle of those two things is Isaiah's voice, which, by the way, I have to sometimes. I know a time when, it's like when's the Kiddush Club meeting, right? But this Yom Kippur, pay attention to those messages, right? The ritual of the Torah, the ritual of the prayers, and right in the middle is Isaiah's voice saying, "Don't forget the moral," right? You can engage in ritual all day long. You can engage in ritual and this process of Teshuvah through the entire month of Elul and through the High Holy Days. If you don't turn to Tzedakah, you miss the point. Isaiah's thoughts this is not the first time, it's not the last time, that a prophet raises this issue of injustice in the world. Right? Isaiah is building on the shoulders of other earlier prophets. One of those is Amos. And some of these earlier prophets, I think, say even more strongly. So let's look at what Amos says in chapter 5 of the book of Amos. Someone read?
I spurn your festival. I am not appeased by your solemn assembly. If you offer me burnt offerings or your meal offerings, I will not accept them. I will pay no heed to your gifts of fatlings. Spare me the sound of your hymns. Let me not hear the music of your lutes. But let justice well up like water, righteousness like an unfailing mighty stream.
You probably heard that last line before, right? A couple of famous people who are famous for saying that line, right? At least one. What's Amos saying? How is it connected to Isaiah's message? How is it different?
It's not solely about the ritual. And if it's not accompanied by justice and a desire to do justice, then
Good. I think you're being very kind to Amos there. I agree. I think you're on the right track. But I think you're being very kind. What's Amos saying?
Well, it reminds me of what you said last week in your own moral debate about receiving money from the Wexler Foundation and Epstein. And we've seen this multiple times. It's like, if the outcome itself is what you're supposedly asking for, needing, and wanting, but there are moral shades to how you get there. And so Amos is just condemnatory about, you do all the ritual, you give the sacrifice, you do it, but, it's meaningless to me because there's no real basis for it. It's just empty motion.
Right.
And that's a real, for me, definitely a moral issue that I'm struggling with. And it goes back many times when old enough to remember Ivan Boesky, gave millions to Princeton and other places, and then look at what he did. And
Right.
I'm not sure it's equal to Epstein because it didn't involve actual people, but this overall, people who give all this money to Tzedakah, and then you look at the rest of their lives, and it makes you wonder, what does that mean for us?
Okay. And you're saying giving tzedakah perhaps without the feeling behind it? Right. So you're actually in some ways turning it on its head
To
here.
me, I think that's what
Goes both
Amos is
ways.
saying.
It goes both ways.
He's almost saying, at what point there's no value to what you're doing if you don't have the moral goodness.
Right. I think that's what Amos is saying, right? Amos is saying and in the voice of God here, that ritual observance means nothing to God. Right? He doesn't even really qualify it, right? He said, I spurn your festivals. I'm not appeased by your burnt offerings, right? I'm not interested in you coming to shul, right? When I'm interested in you, don't repeat that anymore. He's saying, spare me the sound of your hymns. What are you doing praying? Right? Go out and do. That's what Amos is saying. Right? So in some ways, Isaiah softens the tone a little bit. There's obvious reasons why the rabbis chose Isaiah's message over Amos's, because Isaiah is specifically speaking about fasting and the shofar and all of that, but also softens the tone a little bit. Right? Amos doesn't say, this ritual is for nothing. Right? It's that there needs to be a combination too. But earlier prophets, such as Amos, actually says, save your time and go out and save the world. Do something for the world. Okay? I'm going to make the argument, in part because I don't want to lose my job, that it has to be a balance of the two, right? That you have to have the ritual and the moral. You've got to be, it's got to be both of the heart and the mind, a spiritual and a physical experience, right? That we need both, okay? Let's take a look at a couple of what some medieval commentators are going to say. First,
there's a long tradition of buying away your sins, particularly in other religions.
Sure. Okay. Meaning that, like, it
meaning
can also go the other way. Is what you're saying. You can give tzedakah. You can do what's perceived as all sorts of good deeds, but it's not. It has to actually be the heart has to be in the right place. So.
No, I'm saying the opposite.
Sorry.
That
that's fair too.
That you can literally, what is it called, alms?
Okay. Yeah.
And you can go in, and if you give a certain amount of money, usually to the church, then the priest will say, your sins are forgiven, you're okay.
You're right. That's right. Does that work in Judaism?
No.
Not so much.
So the other question that I have is there may be different levels of tzedakah. Is it more important to, assuming that our way of giving tzedakah is with money, and we don't have the ability to grow more food or whatever, is it more important to support the upper middle class synagogue in Cherry Hill or to provide food for the poor?
Okay, so that's a very good question. We spent some time on Sunday exploring that question a little bit, where we had some interesting debate and conversation around where are our direct obligations? What's most important? And classical commentaries tend to say you start with the inner circle and work your way out, right? So you got to make sure your community is taken care of before we turn to the larger South Jersey Jewish community. We got to make sure the South Jersey Jewish community is taken care of before we turn to the larger American Jewish community. We got to make sure, et cetera, with the exception being you always have to have, an open hand towards Israel, right? Which most commentators will say, okay?
Israel,
but we also acknowledge that was written in a very different time, a time when communication and ability to, know what was going on in a different part of the world, or even a different part of the country that you lived in was much trickier, right? So hurricane relief, like things come up, emergencies come up, where of course we need to turn our attention, right? But it's an interesting discussion in terms of who you give to first, right? And all Jewish commentators will say you got to keep it in the family first. Okay, Bonnie.
Well, first of all, I think it's a combination of both the things. I don't think it's just coming to synagogue on Shabbat. I don't think it's just giving a large amount of money for tzedakah. And then not following out with the other things. A lot of us promise things, a lot of us, and especially on Yom Kippur, but we don't remember to continue it throughout the year.
Right.
It's just like going on a diet. You're all excited the first day, and by the fifth day you quit.
Right.
So I'm very aware of that, and that to me is the level that we have to be. We have to give what we can afford, but we have to get out there and do the work.
Good. Yes, absolutely. I think we're on the same page. I agree with you. Which, by the way, if you look at the commentary here, that's where most of these commentaries are going to go, right? The first commentary, this is he's known as the Radak, right, from sort of 12th, 13th century France. He's going to first quote from Isaiah here, right? And he says, "Indeed, these activities are not chosen and pleasing to God, and here without a broken heart and good deeds and turning away from evil ways." Right? So he's circling back and saying it's not that you should don't stop fasting on Yom Kippur, right? But it has to also be accompanied first with that inner feeling that should come with it, not just an outward expression. And also then it actually has to be followed up with a form of action. Okay? The Al-Sheikh from the the 16th century. He says there are two types of fasts. One is done without self-denial. Inui nefesh, the Torah requires in Yom Kippur. This fast one does due to a conflict with someone with the hope God will exact retribution, or that a person fasts thinking God will come closer to him and not call him guilty if he acts against the other. But there's another type of fast that is about the relationship between a person and God, that a person denies oneself and submits oneself and one's soul before God blesses them. How's he understanding these two forms of fast? Is a little complicated here.
Well, I think the first one, they're saying, this is a bad guy over here, God will take care of him. And
Okay.
with the other one, the person is really dealing with God. It's a one-on-one between God and the person. As opposed to, God, please do this for me.
Okay.
The first one's a transaction. I'll fast if you take care of this.
Yeah.
The second one is freely giving.
That's exactly.
It's bargaining.
It's bargaining.
I'll do this, but I want God to do that for me.
Is that what we do on Yom Kippur? Or sort of how you when you thought about fasting before you walked into the room, is that how you thought about it?
No.
No?
We would suggest that the primary goal of Yom Kippur is we're going to walk out better than we walked in. And just to pick up on that, a person denies oneself and submits oneself, I would suggest that that's alluding to we are going to deny the evil inclination. We are going to deny that about us, which we know is not good for the community, the world, for both God. Rather, we're going to submit ourselves to tzedakah, to righteousness and all the good things. We're going to be good people when we walk out.
Good. I could be very off base, which should be sad. But I actually think that it boils down to it, if we sort of polled most people walking into the shul on Yom Kippur, that they would actually that certainly both ideas would resonate, but that perhaps the concept of fasting is closer linked to the first one, right? What's the goal of Yom Kippur? It's to be absolved of our sins, our transgressions, to start the new year with a clean slate. One of the ways that we reach that goal is by fasting, by afflicting our souls, right? By denying ourselves of these pleasures as an act of showing God, I'm in on this and I need your help with this, right? Because, look, it says so that if you exact retribution, or that a person thinking God will come closer to him and not call him guilty if he acts against the other, right? Look at what I'm doing for God. Look at what I'm doing to help absolve me of my transgressions. Make sense? The second one, which I think Harvey just captured really beautifully, this is and we're also talking about whether it's transactional or not, right? This is really about developing our relationship with God, right? Which hopefully should lead us on that path of tzedakah, right? That I'm actually fasting on Yom Kippur to become a better person. Not in terms of wiping my slate clean. I'd like that. That'd be nice in the process too, because we all make mistakes, right? But I'm fasting on Yom Kippur in order to enhance my relationship with God and become a better person. One of the ways that I enhance my relationship with God and become a better person is by working as God, being an emissary of God in this world and helping to make this world a better place. So I have to turn to action, right? I think there's a major difference there between those two concepts of fasting. It's not necessarily that the first one is wrong, but I think that what our task is how do we make sure that we're really focused on the second, right? Thinking of it that way, for example, fasting takes on all sorts of other, could help us wrestle with all sorts of other things, right? I'm removing the food from my life for these 25 hours, right? And Harvey said that that's supposed to help me in my relationship with God. Amy said that helps me on sort of the spiritual path. So that the food sort of becomes representative of this Yetzer Hara, this evil inclination, right? There's some people who actually have major struggles with food, right? But we all have struggles with something. So how does the food, or lack thereof, become a stand-in, right? what is the Yetzer Hara that I need to cleanse myself in order to bring me closer to God, right? Could be overeating. It could be the way I interact with people on a daily basis. It could be the way I spend money, right? It could be, the list goes on, right? So what would it mean to think of my experience of fasting as looking to become a better person in the world and seeing it as helping me to name what are those things that serve as those barriers, those obstacles, those evil inclinations, evil impulses that are getting in the way of me becoming that better person, enhancing my relationship with God. Okay. Thoughts, comments? Yes. Okay.
So, can you do that whole without fasting?
Sure. Are you looking for me to give you permission not to fast?
There are people
To do all that
can't
without
fast.
That's such a good point. It's such a good point. It's such a good
You
point.
have it, you know, your audience here today, your congregation is not your age.
Correct.
Not your age.
I would say the majority, no, I wouldn't say, many, some, have the health issues where they're not able to.
Yes. Yes. It's such an important point they brought up, and it's something I did want to bring up. Yes. The ideal is to fast on Yom Kippur because that's what we're told to do on Yom Kippur. But I think that for those who can't fast on Yom Kippur, and there are lots of different reasons why one can't fast on Yom Kippur, right? But for whatever reason, if you've either been medically told that you cannot or should not fast, if you just simply, based on previous experiences and aren't interested in passing out again or whatever, or getting sick again, that you choose not to fast, I hope that something that I'm doing today is actually alleviating a sense of guilt, a feeling of guilt, right? Because really, the point of fasting on Yom Kippur is not to experience that sense of affliction and suffering. It's to be moved towards this process of growth and teshuvah and becoming a better person. That's what fasting is all about. And in my opinion, does the grumbling in my stomach help me to remind me of that on Yom Kippur? It does, right? And it might require someone who's not fasting on Yom Kippur to, have certain other triggers or alarms or whatever it might be in place to help remind you of that. But if you're doing that work, you're doing the work of fasting, right? God says, is this the fast I desire? No, not really. Not really. God would be much happier, in my personal theological opinion, if we all decided, to do great things in the world and to help make the world a better place than if we fast on Yom Kippur. I truly believe that, right? So I hope that part of this conversation today is actually helping to relieve some people of some guilt of maybe not being able to or choosing not to fast on Yom Kippur.
I'm diabetic, and my doctor said you shouldn't fast, but there's a way you can combine it that instead of sitting down and having a full lunch, you either cut back on the insulin or just take a few crackers to adjust before the medicine. So in a way, you are fasting to a different point, to a different extent.
I think that that's obviously
You're not indulging.
right. You're not indulging. I think that you have, number one, and Judaism is very clear on this. I'll let you be very clear, right? Health is first. Pikuach nefesh, the saving of life takes precedence over all, right? So if it's a health risk for you not to fast, you should not fast. You would actually be, I'm serious here, you would be committing a sin that you need to atone for on Yom Kippur if you were to eat on Yom Kippur when you should, if you were to not eat on Yom Kippur when you should be eating. Really, that's really true. But we can also think of other ways, right? So maybe it's an adjustment in what we're eating that day, and just an awareness that helps that helps to trigger certain emotions and feelings in us. It could also be saying, I can't fast. I think everyone should say this, but but perhaps I can't fast on Yom Kippur. But the day after Yom Kippur, since it's a Yontif, I'm not going to suggest that you do it on Yom Kippur, but the day after or the day before Yom Kippur, I am going to go online and make a donation to this organization, or I'm going to sign up for those 20 hours of volunteering that I'm going to go to in the next couple of weeks. That's my fast, right? Okay. Yeah.
I think whether you fast or you don't fast, and it doesn't clear your, make your heart better, clear your conscience, that I'm a Sidney Greenberg graduate, and he always said that that if you just, if you turn away
Right.
and not do what you're supposed to do, the fasting's not going to make you the better person.
Right.
It's how you react afterwards, how you live your day to day, and that you shouldn't feel guilty that maybe you can't fast or maybe you won't fast or whatever it is.
Right.
It's how you really live your life on a day-to-day basis.
Agreed.
And you're going to be righteous.
Be righteous. Right.
Well, I never thought about it before until you asked the question, but it is fascinating when you think about it, that our tradition is that when you fast, you do it as a community.
Mm.
You know, normally you think of asceticism.
Mhm.
People, they fast, they go in cave, they isolate themselves from the community so that they can
Mm.
achieve this greater level of spirituality and connectedness. And I think it's really crucial that we're expected to fast as a community. And so once again, it brings us together as we are all equal, we're all striving for the same thing. You gather strength from the people who are around you, who support you, not just in other things, but even while you're fasting. And I think that that's really crucial to Judaism. If even something like fasting is done communally.
It's very nice. Very nice. Very nice. These things that I actually haven't really thought about the idea of communal fasting before. I think that's really fascinating. And I think it plays into a lot of other things that need to be done in community, right? You have to hear the blast of shofar in the community, right? You've got all these things that are supposed to wake us up. There's supposed to be these experiences of Teshuvah and growth and starting to make that change or that experience of growth in our lives is supposed to ultimately be done in community. Why?
It's really all about community. I mean,
Yeah.
each one of us as an individual, we create the community.
We create the community. Good. Marvin?
Well, two things. First of all, just to pick up on the community, yeah, you feed the hungry. The whole concept is you're thinking about those who have greater needs, and that we should be helping. I did want to share one thing.
Okay.
So when I was young and I would go fast, I used to pray for the Phillies to win the World Series, for the Eagles to win their games. It didn't work. So I decided the first thing wasn't such a great idea. I'll go the second. Maybe it's all about maybe not.
Oh,
The Eagles,
praying
the
for
Phillies.
Uh-huh.
That's
a good story. That's a good. Yeah, thanks a lot for praying for the Eagles. So Harvey had this experience of praying for the other, right? The teams, but maybe we first have to start with
Maybe
the
they're
prayers
right.
for maybe not. By the way, what's, in my opinion, again, I'm certain people are watching. No, I'm just kidding. What's one of, if not the most important things that you can do this Yom Kippur in terms of the actual experience of being here? I would say being in community is absolutely one of them, right? The experience of being transformed, standing in community, right? That Kol Nidre always gets me, right? To see the Torah's out, being passed around the congregation, with that chilling music, and seeing everyone's out, always brings me, like, I have trouble keeping it, I always hope that Rabbi Peltz is going to call the page numbers for that, so I don't have to cry. But what's really crucial, what's another crucial element of coming here on Yom Kippur? Feels like a trick question, but I'm not intending it to be.
To the confessional, I guess.
Well, the confessional, yeah, that's big. We want to do the confessional. Right, but remember, I'm trying to get us to think in addition to the ritual here.
Bring the bags.
Bring the bags of food. Bring the bags of food. Bringing that bag, that yellow ShopRite bag, right, full of food, is, I'm going to argue, equally, if not more important than anything else you're going to do on Yom Kippur itself, right? At least equally important. And I'm not downplaying the ritual here. The ritual is really important, right? You got to bring that bag of food. We all have to bring that bag of food, right? Because that's at least an important nod. It's nothing small. That's an important nod to that message that Isaiah delivers, right? It's also what the Radak is mentioning here on page 3. That in response to this this crying out of Isaiah, Radak said, "It is good for you to share your food that you have that day to give the hungry half, and you and he, she, they will eat and enjoy together, right? Part of that experience, a direct connection. I'm removing food from my life and I'm giving it to someone else. Yes.
The idea of fasting and even prayer, I think, is what we're saying here is they are not ends in themselves. They are a means to an end.
Exactly.
All right? And the bringing of the food is the end. The community is the end.
Correct.
It's the whole idea to put us in the mood and in the frame to go forward. But
Right.
it's not just doing that. Actions speak louder.
And I think that that's like such an important thing to name, right? And I think I always get a little nervous saying some of these things as a rabbi, but I also think it's so important for people to hear, really, because people over my lifetime have said them to me. It was so important to my growth and understanding, right? There's no feeling of shame or guilt standing there on Rosh Hashanah or Yom Kippur and struggling to follow along in the machzor, right? You get to the confessional and everyone just mumbling along. What's going on? Wow. I'm trying to atone for my sins. I can't even say what I'm supposed to be atoning for, right? And I think that there's a lot of obstacles, that are perceived obstacles that are in place, right? When it comes to engaging in the ritual in that way, right? But it's really about those are means to an end, right? The end being, if you come on Yom Kippur, you bring your bag of food, right? You stand there in community and you close your eyes. I'm not saying don't say that you're welcome to pray, to say the prayers. Please, don't get me wrong. You close your eyes, you open them and you look around and you close them again. You say, oh my gosh, this is magnificent, right? This is what it means to be in community. This is what it means to feel supported and loved. This is what it means to be inspired to make a difference in the world, right? You're doing the work of Yom Kippur in just as powerful, if not more powerful way than any prayer from the prayer book that you're going to say, from every food that you do or don't eat, right? It's so important for people to give themselves that permission on the high holy days. And I think that applies to Shabbat. I think that applies to basically anything that goes on here in the synagogue. And it's not an argument for we shouldn't be learning the prayers. It's not an argument for we shouldn't be engaging in the sort of what we conceive as the traditional rituals, right? But it's understanding that those are really a means to a larger end. And if we can try to appreciate and understand those ends, even if we're not unable to fully participate in the means to get there, we're still doing that very holy work. Let's read Heschel. This is an amazing piece that Heschel writes. You may have heard that this is a relatively well-known quote of Heschel from his work, The Prophets. Someone want to read in a very Heschelian voice, an Isaiah voice. I need a Heschelian voice. Okay, yeah, that's okay. Your voice will.
The worth of worship, far from being absolute, is contingent upon moral living, and that when immorality prevails, worship is detestable. Questioning man's right to worship through offerings and songs, they maintain that the primary way of serving God is through love, justice, and righteousness. Of course, the prophets did not condemn the practice of sacrifice in itself. They did, however, claim that deeds of injustice vitiate both sacrifice and prayer. Men may not drown the cries of the oppressed with the noise of hymns, nor buy off the Lord with increased offerings. Prophets disparaged the cult when it became a substitute for righteousness.
So Heschel is writing about this. By the way, I think he's being awfully nice to Amos there as well, because I think Amos said it a bit stronger than he did just there. But the message is clear, right? It's the message that I've been sharing and that we've been talking about, right? They disparaged the cult when it became a substitute for righteousness. It's not one or the other, right? It's important to have both, but it certainly cannot, should not sway only towards this cultic practice, this ritual practice, if this idea of having your heart in it and this idea of turning to righteousness is not also part of it. By the way, this next piece that I want to share with you is a piece that was put out by Rabbis for Human Rights in a resource packet that they produced. The first line, the italicized line, is a translation some of the alchait, some of the confessionals that we give, right? And then there's sort of the non-italicized is sort of the adapted piece that they're inserting. But to think about, I wonder how often, or how many stand on the high holy days when we pound our chests and we say, for all these sins that we, again going back to what Amy said, almost all of the language of the high holy days is in the communal, in the plural we, right? It's not. No, alchait shechatanu, right? Alchait shechatanu lefanecha, for the sin that we have committed against. Okay.
Yes.
So let's read this. For the sin that we have committed before you by hardening our hearts, ignoring poverty, homelessness, and despair. How many people, when we read the hardening of the hearts, does that come to mind? Right? What?
No, I always think of Pharaoh.
You think of Pharaoh, right? Right? Or we think of perhaps ways that we've hardened our own hearts, like in our familial relationships, which is important too. Don't get me wrong, right? But what this text is trying to do is to put a social justice lens on the text, right? For the sin that we've committed before you by exploitation, living well on those who serve us and live in poverty. For the sin that we have committed before you by silence, saying nothing when we knew that a human being's breathing is treated. For the sin we have committed before you by narrow-mindedness, feeling only our own pain, closing our hearts to the agony of the bereaved and oppressed. By the way, you're all in tip-top shape form for Holy Day. Sounded excellent communal reading. Excellent communal reading. How did it feel?
Great. By the way, I'm a Reformed Tzedakah.
Do they read that? You read this?
We read this, and we read the other
Beautiful.
ones that from
Beautiful.
at the same time. It's part of after we do the Hebrew, we do another part, and this is
Beautiful.
part of our.
Beautiful. I'm glad to hear that.
This community to me is an amazing community. And if you could get it, if people really want to do something, get involved with Jewish Family and Children's Service. They feed people all the time. We deliver packages.
Right.
We deliver packages on holidays. We deliver food. We get this is what we need for the pantry. It's very easy to partake. But I do find, even in my own family, I do find people who lack empathy for others. There's no great feeling, and I myself don't understand it, but right in my own family, they really never cared outside their own little circle. And they are the people that don't get involved. Our community really does get involved, and that's a beautiful thing. I've been in other communities, it's not the same.
Agreed. I think, Bonnie, I think you're right. I think we're really blessed to live in a very special community. I'm also very aware that I'm really preaching to the choir here in a lot of ways. I'm very aware of that. But I think it also is an important reminder for us. First of all, I hope that part of what we've accomplished today is sort of shaken a little bit how we traditionally think of the experience of Yom Kippur and what we're working towards or growing towards on Yom Kippur, right? But also to remind us that we always have that work to do, right? If Teshuvah, which we talked about last week, is about this constant growth process, right? There's always Teshuvah to do. Hopefully, a little less of saying we're sorry each year, but there's always that turning. There's always that growing, right? And it's the same thing when it comes to our relationship with Tzedakah, with bringing more righteousness or justice to the world, right? I can go around the room almost person by person and name, oh, you do this for this organization in the area. You know, everyone. It's an amazing community, right? It inspires me every day. But for all of us, there's always more to be done. See?
So Rabbi, it's fascinating that Bonnie says that. There is a book out of yours called The Moral Arc Bends Towards Justice.
Yeah.
Would have said Tzedakah, but he wasn't Jewish.
There's a Jewish organization called Bend the Arc. I'm not thinking about.
Well,
Yeah.
which is perfect, which is really neat. But let me just pick up on that because in addition to what God expects of us, the new research seems to show that when you're helping other people, endorphins are released and you feel good. So if you want, you can view this as, why do I come to say that? Because I want to get into that frame of mind. I want to appreciate that helping others helps yourself.
Right. Right. Beautiful.
Or Mr. Rogers. Always look for the helpers.
Always look for the helpers. Always look for the helpers. Beautiful. I want to share with you, as to conclude, how Rabbi Endelman concludes her piece, because sometimes you realize that you just can't say it as well as someone else. And I really, the piece that she wrote is truly beautiful. So I encourage everyone to read it. You can find it on the JTS website. But listen to what she reads. Our task on Yom Kippur then is for each of us to try to discern what the world needs us for, and to remind ourselves of the obligation to fulfill that task. From the local to the global, the world around us is full of causes crying out for our attention, where each of us sees a need that we can respond to, a problem that we can help alleviate, suffering that we can lessen in some way. Yom Kippur is the day to identify it and to commit amidst all of our family and work and personal obligations to do something to help. We must not allow ourselves to be satisfied with merely showing up to services, fasting, singing, beating our chests, sitting, standing, bowing, and passing the hours as we move through the pages of the mosque. That's tzedakah. And that's why tzedakah, I believe the rabbis long ago understood that tzedakah has to be one of those pillars, those things that can help to avert the divine decree. Teshuvah, Tefillah, the tzedakah. Right? We have to turn to Teshuvah. We have to grow. We have to continue moving on our path. We have to turn to the ritual of prayer and being part of community. And we also have to turn to tzedakah. We have to figure out, how can I make a difference in the world? How can I be inspired today, really every day, especially on Yom Kippur, when we hear the prophet Isaiah cry out, really God cry out through the mouth of Isaiah, is this really the fast I desire? We have much work to do. And Yom Kippur helps to remind us of that. But really our community, our inspiring community, helps us to remind us that each day. And I thank you for the work that I know that you do. And may we all this year continue to grow and to figure out how we can make even a bigger difference in the world, making the world a more just, a more righteous place. Be righteous. Thank you.